16 weeks down, one to go for your redraft leagues, and the NFL season is winding down, but that doesn't mean fantasy football is over. DFS is there. Right now, there are probably two managers in your redraft league that actually care about what's happening. They care about the fact that the Browns are just destroying the New York Jets. However, for the rest of your league, you guys need something to do on Sundays, and that something is DFS. We are here to help you build some cash lineups, some tournament lineups. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy presented by Club Fantasy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. And as I mentioned, it is week 17. Fantasy season is winding down for most, but DFS actually goes all the way through the Super Bowl and it goes into other sports. I'll let Kelly talk to you about some DFS golf that's going to be coming up here real soon because she is the queen of DFS golf. However, we still got some football to talk about. And this week is a very important week for a lot of NFL teams. This is before we get into the really weird who's going to start. I mean, I guess we've been doing the really weird who's going to start at quarterback for a while now. Jarrett Hall back into the game. Russell Wilson no longer has a job. However, we can talk about that later. Let's get into my co-host, the people who are going to help you build tournament lineups and cash lineups. First, we have tournaments. Kelly in Phoenix. How are you this evening, my friend?
I'm lovely. Having a great time over here.
Yeah. Are you excited about the Browns beatdown, or does it matter to you at all? How many championships are you in, if you don't mind my asking?
I'm in 2 championships, which is not many considering how many leagues that I'm in.
2 more than me.
But I am enjoying this game. The Thursday night game was great so far. We're recording Thursday night, but I'm torn. We're watching the Browns. This household is a Cardinals/Ravens household.
Right.
But you can't not cheer for Joe Flacco.
So that's where I kind of stand on it because obviously I'm from Northeast Ohio. The Deshaun Watson signing made me have some mixed feelings about the Browns. But this is not his team. This is Joe Flacco's team. Go Browns. Austin Amandolia is going to help us with our cash lineups. Austin, I'm putting you on the spot. How many championships you in, buddy?
I am currently in 3,
right,
including our Club Fantasy Redraft League.
Yes, you are.
Which I have a vested interest in this game right now. I need Breece Hall to just rack up the catches right now to spite our own faithiness. But yeah, and Joe Flacco being quarterback means I'm watching the Cleveland Browns right now, which is fun.
There you go. Everybody loves a Joe Flacco-led Cleveland Browns. Maybe ownership should take note there. Guys, before we get into this, we don't just talk DFS. You can actually play with us. You will find links in the description of this video, also in every DFS article we write at Club Fantasy, that allow you to sign up and play with us on both DraftKings and FanDuel. They are $2 buy-ins. We normally get, 8 to 12 people. We haven't filled one up yet, but hey, it's week 17. You're out of your fantasy league. You certainly have $2. Jump in, play with us. Let's fill these bad boys up and have some fun. Also, go ahead and hit subscribe right now. Early on in the video, you're watching us on YouTube. It takes you about 2 seconds to go click that subscribe button. We were getting close to our 800th follower, I think, last night. Maybe 700. Shows you how discombobulated I am. However, I hope we're over it now. But if we're not, you can be the one, and we would very much appreciate it. Austin, you have a note in here, but I know sometimes we carry these things over. It says to talk about FanDuel Double-Ups. I meant to ask you before the show if this was still relevant. Is this still relevant?
This is still relevant. That's why I bolded it too, is to be like, hey, talk about this. So
perfect.
When I typically, like earlier in the season when I was playing FanDuel Double-Ups, if you go to your FanDuel app, you open up your contest, you'll see this like 3 to 100 size contest. There's a bunch of double-ups in there. It's really easy to go to those. But recently I went to the multipliers, and in FanDuel, if you've never hit the multipliers button and looked at that category of contest, they count double ups as multipliers as opposed to DraftKings, which when you're looking at multipliers, you tend to think of triple ups, quadruple ups, etc. And what I wanted to flag about this is that FanDuel, unlike DraftKings, has not been reducing their contest size as the weeks go on. So they have single entry $5 double up contest that can have up to 680 something people join it. Top 300 double their money. The past couple of weeks, they've only been getting about 500 people in that contest. So it means you're having to beat way less people in order to cash in those lineups. And I just wanted to share that little trick because I just happened upon it and I was like, oh, this is cool. I can enter an extra double up and just beat a couple hundred people instead of the 380 I typically have to beat to cash.
I have been having such hectic Sundays the last few weeks. I have played, other than our contest, no other contests. So I need to get back on that. But my lineups have just been dreadful lately. So it's probably good that I haven't been donating money to everybody else out there. But that's kind of how it happened. So I'll tell you about a lineup that wasn't dreadful. We call this Answers to the Test. It's last week's winning lineup and slate breaker. Last week's Millie Maker. Very Cleveland Browns lineup. Joe Flacco, Breece Hall, Devin Singletary, CeeDee Lamb. No surprise, Amari Cooper. DJ Chark, love finding a way for him in the lineup. David Njoku, TJ Hawkinson, a double tight end lineup after Kelly's heart. Unfortunately, Hawkinson, I think he had a decent game, but went down in that game. And then the New York Jets defense, Amari Cooper, what a day. Joe Flacco for parts of that game didn't even look at another wide receiver. 54 points on DraftKings, 46 points on FanDuel. Kelly, when you look at a lineup like this, a double tight end lineup winning someone $1 million, that just has to make you smile.
It's my favorite, one of my favorite things to see, as a matter of fact. I love this lineup. I actually considered DJ Chark myself as like
really
a super cheap flex. I was just checking to see which lineup. I don't think I went with it, but I literally was like, oh. But yeah, no surprise. Joe Flacco's been on a tear. My article last week was called Joe Flacco is him. Prior to that, it was something about Joe Flacco. 2 weeks in a row, Joe Flacco was the star. So
it seems like you may be doing that 3 weeks in a row. It's halftime on the Thursday game right now, and he is balling out again. So.
Yep. Love it.
I love it. Austin, you looking at this and taking anything away from it?
Oh boy, this is just why I don't play in the Millie Maker, frankly. Like, who would have guessed like Amari Cooper would have had like 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. The thing that was fascinating is it ended up being a very stars and scrubs lineup approach. Like Devin Singletary didn't hit double-digit points. TJ Hawkinson didn't hit double-digit points. The New York Jets defense, like they were okay. You know, it wasn't one of those weeks where your defense gets you a touchdown, stuff like that. Yeah. But having Cooper score 50 points and Breece Hall go off the way he did was enough to get this lineup to the Millie Maker winner.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up the New York Jets because the Jets were really good for one half of football defensively. And then Washington just started scoring. Jacoby Brissett comes in, and all of a sudden it's just a better team altogether. And they let Washington come all the way back in that game. This guy was probably running away with this. Now, that was a 1 o'clock game, so I guess he wasn't like sweating it out, but he probably felt really good at halftime already because Amari Cooper was already feasting, and then got worse. But I mean, he's $1 million richer than at least I am. Maybe you guys are hiding millions from me, but kudos to that guy, right?
Kudos to that guy.
Or girl.
I did play Joe Flacco and the Jets last week. Just throwing that out there. And the Jets were my defense on the show last week as well.
Kelly, I almost feel like I did Flacco and the Jets as well. I'll have to go look. I don't remember now, but I feel like I did something similar because I listened to the show and I take a lot of you guys' advice, even on days where, in case you guys didn't know, I was out last week. A semi-truck exploded next to my house. I had no power, no electricity, no internet. It was a very interesting Thursday night, to say the least, but I was able to listen to the show and set my lineup to it on Sunday morning. And Kelly, I have something we need to talk about at the end of the show, because when I miss shows, you win. We'll talk about that just a little bit later. We start the week 17 lineups off with what we call top of the class. These are the players priced $8,000 or higher that we are targeting in cash, which will be provided to you from Austin, and tournaments from Kelly. And I'm going to let Austin get us started with a name we've seen on here quite often, but there's a reason. I'm going to tell you, Austin, I don't know for a fact it's the first time I've seen 11,000, but it certainly made my eyes bleed like it was the first time I saw 11,000.
Yeah. So first off, we have Christian McCaffrey at 9,600 on DraftKings and a whopping 11K on FanDuel. And I started writing in my notes like, okay, we may have hit my breaking point on FanDuel with this price. But the more I thought about it, I was like, have we though? Okay. So Washington has allowed 40 points per game to opposing running backs since week 13. That is their past 4 games. So they are getting torched by the running back position. Christian McCaffrey gets 40 points in his sleep, let alone against a great matchup. And San Francisco are 13.5-point favorites with a 31-point implied team total. There's a good chance that Christian McCaffrey doesn't play the entire fourth quarter of this game. But if that's the case, he probably scored 2 touchdowns along the way and got you 30 fantasy points, which is plenty to get out of there with. I'm probably not playing him on FanDuel because there are some options that are cheaper this week on FanDuel that I like. But if you told me you were playing him on FanDuel, like, I get it. I'm not going to be mad about it.
Yeah. I'm certified that Christian McCaffrey is going to go off this week. I shared this story on our Wednesday show. I needed Christian McCaffrey to go off to bring me back all the way in my bid to beat my little brother in the fantasy championship. So this was the semifinals last week, and I was down big, and McCaffrey went off in the first half, and all he needed to do was duplicate that in the second half, and I had a chance to win my matchup. But instead, the Niners just stopped giving him the ball with 10 minutes left in the game because Baltimore jumped out to that crazy lead in the second, at the very beginning of the second half, and that kind of crushed me. And so what's going to make it even worse is when he puts up 60 in my third place game, because, you know, third place is exactly where I wanted to be when fantasy started. Kelly, when I was done crying about Christian McCaffrey, I was a little shocked to see that one of my favorite running backs is starting to work his way into Christian McCaffrey pricing on FanDuel, and that happens to be your favorite high-priced player of the week.
Yes, Kyren Williams, 8.3K on DraftKings, 9.4K on FanDuel. I mean, it's mid-rostership, 9%. Christian McCaffrey's 25%, but everybody else is around like the 12, 10, 9.
Yeah.
So that's why I say mid-rostership.
Well, it's just incredible to me, first of all, that 25% of people who have built lineups have been like $11,000. Do what you will, Christian McCaffrey. But for me, Austin made the point, and obviously cash lineup versus tournament lineup building, very different. You're not fitting, I don't want to say you're not fitting 11,000 into your tournament lineup. I guess you could on a Stars and Scrubs lineup. That's actually, it's probably more applicable on a tournament lineup. But regardless, Kyren Williams has been a guy where I felt like he's always been like that sneaky guy. He's usually the fifth, sixth running back price. And it seems like they've gotten wise to just let's throw him in there because he's played his ass off playing.
Yeah, he's on quite a streak. This could be his 7th game in a row with 100 or more scrimmage yards. That is unbelievable. 7 games in a row, 2 or more touchdowns in 3 of the last 5 road games this season. So I think it's well worth it. Projected for 18 points. That's a heck of a lot of points projected, knowing that he's probably going to get more.
And Austin brought up that, you know, there's a good chance Christian McCaffrey's not playing the fourth quarter. There's a good chance in this Rams game, it's all Kyren Williams in the fourth quarter, because I feel like the Giants are good enough to keep this close. But I think in the fourth quarter, you're going to see the Rams just wanting to kill the clock and winning this matchup against the Giants. I think it's a great call. So.
Yeah, the reason I really like Kyren Williams here is that rostership. It's spread out a lot across the running backs, so I'm not super concerned about him being on every single roster, which frees me up to maybe pick somebody else who is on every roster that's more affordable even this week.
No, I think that's a great call. And as we get into the more affordable players, they are called the Van Nerds. Typically, this is the good student, but they spend a little bit too much time on their instrument. When we're looking at this from a fantasy perspective, it is the $6,000 to $8,000 players. And Kelly, I'm going to let you just keep rolling for us.
Sure. Let's talk about Rashee Rice.
Let's talk about Rashee Rice. Love it.
Not only is his quarterback looking to save some face, he's also super, super reliable. This could be, talking about streaks, his 6th game in a row with 6 or more catches and 55 or more receiving yards. So put that in your little pocket if you're putting in some prop bets. He's had a touchdown pass in 2 of the last 3 games, projected for 15 points. And here we go. Highest rostership, tied with Hopkins at 16%.
Wow. I'm way more shocked DeAndre Hopkins is up that high.
I know. I was questioning that as well, but here we are.
Yeah.
The next one I have
I say
on
you
here.
prefer a Hopkins teammate, actually.
Yeah, I do. Let's talk about King Henry. I mean, we talked about him a lot this season, and for good reason. I'm surprised to see him at 6'9" on DraftKings, but I'm going to roll with it. 8K on FanDuel. Did you know that he's the third player ever to have 10 or more touchdowns in 6 straight seasons?
Did not know that.
Ever. Like, I need to go research who the other 2 people are because that's crazy.
It's got to be Jerry Rice for one of them. I just don't know
Probably.
who the other would be.
But he's had a rushing touchdown, speaking of, in 4 of his last 5 games. This is a really long history with Houston. He has a bunch of stats that I could throw out against Houston. But the one I like the most is that in the 6 games that he's played against them, he's had 125 or more rushing yards plus a rushing touchdown in each of those 6 games. Super low rostership at 2%. I don't get it, but I'm on it.
I remember when I was doing my DFS rankings for the week, moving Henry up simply because he's playing Houston. I'm like, he eats Houston's breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single time he plays them. He needs to be a part of my lineup building.
I think it was like a total of 10 rushing touchdowns in like the 6 games also, like total.
Yeah.
And it was very wild. Something wild like that.
Well, I was going to say, normally when Derrick Henry plays Houston, he goes wild. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good one. Austin, when I was looking over your players, well, let me be clear here. I was skimming the sheet and I saw mention of more than one Arizona Cardinal and expected that to fall under Kelly's name. But it was not Austin. It was you.
Yeah, now that I realize it, I end up having 3 Cardinals, which is a little bit unsettling for me. I did not
pick your favorite.
That's one of my rules I typically have, is to not have 3 players from the same team in my cash lineup, but I might go with it this week, actually. So first off, we have Kyler Murray, who is $6,300 on DraftKings and $7,800 on FanDuel. And this is basically a matchup argument. The Philadelphia Eagles continue to get torched by quarterbacks. They're averaging 19.14 points per game, allowed 2 quarterbacks over their past 4 games. This includes a game against the combination of Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor, and another game against Drew Lock. So if you think Kyler Murray is better than those 3, I think this is a pretty decent matchup. Kyler also has 30 or more rushing yards in 4 of his 6 starts and a rushing touchdown in half of his starts. So I feel really good about this matchup. Philadelphia has not done well against dual threat quarterbacks when they faced them, which was really only once, and Josh Allen, who put up a whopping 80 rushing yards when he played the Eagles earlier this season. So I love the floor that Kyler Murray will have with his legs and the ceiling that he potentially has. I particularly like him on FanDuel this week, where we value those rushing quarterbacks a little bit more. I have some intrigue in a cheap quarterback that we'll talk about later, but I like Kyler. He's probably the guy I'm going to be rolling with this week. He's a nice, solid option.
Kelly, as a Cardinals fan, do you concur? Is this going to be a week where we see a little flash of old Kyler Murray?
You know, I weighed that out myself and I decided not to go that direction. It's only because we had Michael Wilson healthy last week, put up 0. Yeah. It was tough to see that. And I'm not sure if it was the pass or the catch. And so I was just a little gun shy this week on Kyler.
I think it's fair. That's why we keep you around, is you got that you got that bird's eye view of the Cardinals. Yeah. Austin, I think you might be onto something with your next pick here, because I think it would be super fitting if Bijan Robinson just went bananas a week after making sure not one of his fantasy managers made a championship. Now, let me be clear. He was okay last week. I just mean the season he's had. No, none of his managers are likely in many championships.
Yeah, I feel nervous every time I write his name for an article for a show, just because I feel like it has not worked out for me at all yet. But we're going with Bijan Robinson once again. He's $6,600 on DraftKings. Here's the reason I'm really going after him, though. He is $7,100 on FanDuel. For a running back of Bijan Robinson's caliber on FanDuel, that is a freaking steal. So I cannot resist hitting that button this week. I think Arthur Smith is sort of playing for his job right now. If
Certainly.
the Falcons falter these next 2 weeks, he is not going to be given a chance for another season. So he needs to play his best players and make sure that he gets a couple of wins. I don't think it matters if he wins the division or not, but I think him demonstrating that this offense is going to look good and that it warrants him having another year with a quarterback is going to be important for his career moving forward. But also the matchup is pretty good. Chicago's been allowing the 8th most points to running backs throughout the entire season. And Atlanta are 3-point underdogs, which is where Bijan Robinson tends to thrive. He tends to be more of the running back they go to whenever they are in a competitive game. Tyler Algier tends to get more run when they are ahead towards the end of the game and burning clock. So I like the matchup for Robinson this week, like him to get in the end zone.
I think it's a great call. I'm going to go off script here on you, Austin, and with the news that Russell Wilson will not be a Denver Bronco next season. Is that a quarterback you think your Falcons might be in play with?
Oh, God.
I facetiously made a joke last night that he was going to go to Atlanta just as a middle finger to Future and maybe show Future that he's raising his kid just right in his hometown. So.
I personally feel like Atlanta is more headed for a Ryan Tannehill type, a little Arthur Smith reunion if he keeps his job. I don't imagine Russell Wilson even wanting to come to Atlanta, but maybe he will sign whoever gives him an offer. I don't think he would fit in that system either. Personally, I feel like you're going to get either a dual threat guy, and Russell Wilson no longer really has the athleticism for that, or kind of these like Kirk Cousin, Ryan Tannehill types.
Gotcha. So it's an interesting thing. I just know that there's going to be a few people in play, and Atlanta has played themselves into a spot where they really aren't going to be able to draft one of the premier guys without making an enormous trade. So they may be a little bit more active in the free agent market.
10th pick.
What's that?
10th pick right now.
Oh, is that what? Really? At 7 and 8, they're still at 10th? That's interesting. I thought they'd be way worse off than that, but I guess that's just how it goes. Bookworms. These are the quiet kids with their nose in the books, easily underestimated, but watch out. They're sharp. We are looking at the players $4,000 to $6,000. So kind of the bottom of the middle range. Austin, keep us riding here.
Yeah. So
first Arizona Cardinal.
Yeah. now that you pointed this out, I'm really getting nervous. I have Trey McBride, who is $5,900 on DraftKings and $6,800 on FanDuel. Basically, there's not a pass catcher in this Arizona Cardinals defense that I can trust except for Trey McBride.
Yeah, Kelly pointed out Michael Wilson caught nothing last week.
Yeah, which I looked at his stat line as part of my prep for this week, and he has 2 consecutive weeks with 0 catches and had 7 total targets between those 2 games. So he's on a
prior to last week was the first time he was actually assigned a drop. He had never had a drop prior to last week.
Wow. Bummer.
I know.
But Trey McBride has only 1 game with fewer than 6 targets in his past 9 starts. Mm-hmm. So unlike most of the other Arizona Cardinals defense, his role is pretty locked in. They're also 9.5-point underdogs against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I expect them to pass the ball a decent amount. And the Eagles have kind of gotten back to that point where they're not great against tight ends this year. So I really like the matchup. And honestly, I'm treating him as a wide receiver this week. I'm treating like a Michael Pittman type, Deontay Johnson when Philadelphia or Pittsburgh actually like was somewhat decent. Just a target hog that is going to get me there via the PPR scoring.
Interesting comment. You're treating him as a wide receiver. Is this, when you look at or I guess this might be a better question for Kelly, but when you look at a situation, Austin, where you might run 2 tight ends out there, they would need to be target hogs like that, right? Like at least one of them that you're in your head feeling like they're a wide receiver.
Yes. And so Trey McBride is the type where I would contemplate 2 tight end builds. I feel like 2 tight end builds are very rarely optimal.
Yeah.
And so I will just tend to like decide that I'm punting at wide receiver and finding a wide receiver that's more like a tight end in terms of the like gets a little bit of volume and make it in the end zone. That's just my approach. But definitely like Trey McBride is the type of tight end where I'm like, I could see taking a 2 tight end approach with him.
That makes
I did try it last week.
Kelly is influencing the entire DFS world at this point. Austin tried it. Kelly made a guy $1 million last week. This is what you tune into this show for. 2 tight end sets. But Kelly, in all seriousness, when you look at these 2 tight end sets, and you've been talking about it for weeks, do you tend to lean on at least one, if not both guys need to be higher volume, so you're not just banking on that tight end touchdown like a lot of folks are when it comes to that position in fantasy?
I look for my main tight end to be that high volume. When I play one in a flex, I'm looking at somebody who's just bringing in more reliable. Well, I guess that is have to do with production now that I say that out loud, but I'm looking at somebody who's bringing in like 6 to 8 fantasy points.
Okay.
And I find tight ends to be a lot more reliable than any other position, but that's just
especially at their price, because that's the one nice thing about DFS is the stream tight ends are also priced like some dart throw wide receiver. It makes a lot of sense.
3,000 to 4,000 at the most.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of dart throws, Austin, you saw that Russell Wilson no longer has a job, and you're just diving in there, man.
Yeah, this is not as much as a dart throw as you might think it is. So I am intrigued by Jarrett Stidham this week. He is $4,800 on DraftKings and $6,100
as a starting quarterback
on FanDuel. Right. So I just look at that price and I start to salivate because I'm like, that just is too promising. Imagine what you can do with that. Like if you put Jarrett Stidham in, I bet you could play Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill both. I haven't tried it yet, but with Jaylen Waddle out this week, that could be an incredibly fun lineup to go after. The other thing is he had 2 starts last year. And in each of those games, he had 7 rush attempts with at least 30 rushing yards. So he has a fairly safe floor with that rushing upside. And if he gets in the end zone, like that gets you, 30 rushing yards and a touchdown. That's 10 points right there. I will feel really good if I get 10 points from Jarrett Stidham on the ground. And the Los Angeles Chargers are a bottom 10 team against quarterbacks. They struggle against the position. So I think this is a great matchup for him as well. And what is basically him trying to make his case for the job next year.
Yeah, it's such an interesting situation. We noted last week that when the Raiders did essentially this same exact thing to Derek Carr last year, it was Jarrett Stidham who came in and took the job, and now he's put 2 AFC West quarterbacks out of a job in consecutive years. Speaking of the AFC West, you want to know what's going on with Josh Jacobs before you make a additional call here, right?
Right. So I just want to throw out here that you need to keep an eye on the injury report this week for Josh Jacobs. He did not practice on Thursday, to my knowledge. So depending on what happens on Friday, he may not play this Sunday. And if he does not play this Sunday, you need to have Zamir White in your cash pool. He is $5,100 on DraftKings, $6,100 from FanDuel. That's just so freaking cheap. Colts have allowed 35 points per game, 2 running backs since week 13. The only team doing worse than them is the beloved Washington Commanders that face Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. So if you're looking for Christian McCaffrey light, go with Zamir White. #bars. Didn't mean for that to rhyme. But anyway, speaking of the last guy that Jarrett Stidham put out of a job, Kelly, you're okay with Derek Carr this week after he was the QB1 last week and is still barely priced?
Holy cow. I never, ever, ever thought that I was going to list Derek Carr, but here we are, 5.5K on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel. Here is something that I had no idea about. He is one of 2 quarterbacks to have 6 games with 300 or more passing yards this season. 6 games out of all of the games. One of 2. The other is CJ Stroud.
I thought this was a passing league. That is, I'm shocked to hear Carr is one of them.
But here's another thing. This could be his 3rd game in a row with not one, not two, but 3 or more passing touchdowns. And he's rostered at 2%. So I'm
He's
like,
playing Tampa Bay, who just
and they're playing
bleeds
Tampa Bay, which
points.
is awful.
Yeah.
So I am kind of really keen on this Derrick Carr pick right now.
Well, if he puts himself into CJ Stroud territory, CJ Stroud went for like 505 touchdowns against Tampa Bay. So maybe they're just going to stick with each other this season. So that it could be the greatest game ever by Derrick Carr. You love to see it. Just absolutely nuts. But yeah, that's a crazy stat, Kelly.
I know.
I would have thought way more quarterbacks had more 300-yard games.
Well, I mean, 6 is not a lot in the span of a season. Yeah.
Not even half.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I also like Jaylen Warren this week in this price range, 5.5K on DraftKings and only 5.7K on FanDuel. You gotta like a bargain. Here's another one that's kind of got these streaks. This is a trend for me. He's had 50 or more scrimmage yards in 7 of the last 8 games. He's got a low rostership at 6%, projected for 12, and Seattle has been pretty weak. So if I can get 12 plus points, I like it. I'm excited about that at this price as well.
Yeah, say dirt cheap to where you guys like some of those higher price running backs. And Austin, this is something you've brought up multiple times, is when you look at those expensive plays, look at them as a combo with the cheap play you're putting with them. To where, Kelly, you brought up, if you can get 12 points out of Jaylen Warren, but you get 30 out of Kyren Williams, well, then you got 42 out of your running backs, and that's just like getting 20 from each of them. And that feels a lot better when you look at it as like a group like that. So I think at his low price point, that 12-point floor is a really, really nice thing. And then to the shock of your two co-hosts, you also like Trey McBride.
I did like Trey McBride. Keep in mind that out of all the tight ends, everybody else also likes Trey McBride, 9% rostership, which means it's pretty spread out, but we're talking like 3% spread on these other tight ends, 9% here for Trey McBride, and 12% of managers are rostering Kittle. 10% are rostering Kelsey.
I was just going to ask about Kelsey because I feel like much like Bijan Robinson, Kelsey could pop this week when it helps absolutely nobody, but 10 is still pretty high there. So
people still believe.
I was going to say, I thought people would stop believing, but clearly they have not. They listen to their journey. Guys, just a quick reminder, you can play against these guys. You can play against me and a lot of other folks from Club Fantasy and a lot of other folks that do really well against us and get to hear their name at the end of the show when they beat us. You will find links in the description of this video, plus in all of the DFS articles. Look out for Austin's article later on today. You'll see links to play with us on both FanDuel and DraftKings. We move on to the bottom. The C's get degrees. These are the players less than $4,000. Austin, walk us through the cash plays that you like and your third and hopefully final Arizona Cardinal.
Yeah, will be my third and final. I think. Did I pick them in? Oh, wait. Actually, well, technically, if you cut my prop bets, there's going to be some more.
Your prop bets tend to tie into your player picks. So that makes sense. You and Kelly are very thoughtful about the fact that if you like somebody up here for a reason, it's probably good to bet on them down there. So I'll allow that.
Yeah. So my third Arizona Cardinal is Rondale Moore, who is $3,600 on DraftKings and $5,200 on FanDuel. Don't watch the game. Let's be clear. You don't want to
don't watch.
You don't want to stress about this because I don't feel great about Rondale Moore, but he is consistently getting touches. He's been one of the more consistent players in the Arizona Cardinals offense. He's just not hitting a ceiling, right? Like he's consistently getting like 5 to 9 points, which at 3,600, I'm like, cool. Maybe he gets in the end zone. So I'm treating him like a tight end, and I'm treating Trey McBride as a wide receiver.
There you go.
I find this blasphemous in like every sense of the word.
Yeah.
You're picking like the smallest man on the team, and you're like, I'm treating him like a tight end. No.
For fantasy purposes.
Yeah. Okay.
Just in the box score. And then because we're scraping at the bottom of the barrel, we're going with the defense. Maybe the first time we've talked about them on the show.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We have the Carolina Panthers. They are $2,700 on DraftKings and $3,400 on FanDuel. I did a ton of research on this. I looked at my lineup. I needed something cheap. And Trevor Lawrence is unlikely to play. So we're good. And even if he does play, he hasn't been good, right? He's been hurt. And so it's hard for him to play through injury, causing turnovers. He fumbles the ball all the dang time. He's basically Daniel Jones out there, but people don't give him the same hate that they give Daniel Jones, whatever. So I like the matchup. I like the fact that they're cheap and they fit in my lineup. This is my DraftKings pick. Kelly actually has picked my cash defense for FanDuel, funny enough. So I'll let her talk about that later. But yeah, Carolina Panthers, they fit in my lineup. And honestly, even though their record is awful, they've only hit negative points as a team defense once this season. So I'm like, good, the floor is there. They don't hit me negative points, we're fine. And I don't think the Jaguars can put up enough points to cause the Panthers to have negative fantasy points as a defense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Kelly, maybe another first on the show. Your two bottom picks are playing one another, and I directly mean your tight end is facing your defensive pick.
I know. I found this to be very strange as well. But unlike Austin, I really did put some research into this.
Well, I was going to say, you had some notes in there for your defense because I honestly was a little thrown off. I tend to shy away from defenses that I are worried could struggle on offense. But you guys have kind of said some nice things about their offense that Jarrett Stidham might not be so bad. But let's just talk about these players, Kelly.
Yeah. I mean, we could start with tight end, Gerald, Everett.
Of course.
3.5K on DraftKings, 5.3K on FanDuel. This, again, another streak. This could be his fourth game in a row with 5 or more catches, which shows that he's getting plenty of action. Mid-rostership, around 9%, which we had already talked about the tight end rostership happening. So it's mid to high. And he's got a projection of 8 fantasy points against arguably the worst defense in the league, or it could be his own team, which is the worst defense in the league. Yeah. So the two worst defenses up against each other.
Interesting, because that's a very interesting point. It was Patriots Chargers, I believe, where I was like, these are, I don't remember who it was now, but there was a game where I thought it was going to be low scoring because both teams sucked. But both their defenses sucked. It was like a Thursday night game, and they scored a ton of points. And I think this could be a similar situation.
So here's why I'm going with the Denver Broncos as my defense this week. I have been using a method where I'm looking at the salary tiers of these defenses, and then I'm looking at their projected points, and then I'm finding any weird anomalies. And if we look back, I don't remember the last time I missed on defense. So I'm going to just keep going with it. Yeah. And yeah, that's my method. They're projected for 8.2 fantasy points. Then tiers around them are 5 fantasy points. So far more fantasy points projected than anybody else in their salary tier. And it's a mid to high rostership, so I'm not the only one who's noticed this anomaly, but there we go.
With your method, do you always end up picking low or mid-tier priced defenses? Does a higher priced defense ever able to weigh in, or would they just have to be projected with a ton of points? Is it always? I've noticed you and Austin typically like to spend up at every other position and take the defense that kind of fits. Now, you just kind of mentioned your method. I'm just wondering, can a high-priced team work its way in? Is it even possible?
No, because the projections typically don't go over 9 fantasy points. So when I'm looking at this, there's no reason for me to spend over 4,000 on a defense when I can look and get the same projected points for another team for like 3,000 to 4,000. I don't spend over 4,000. I don't think I ever have.
Interesting. No, it's just, I was wondering about that because you mentioned.
But no, it's because the points projection. It's just not worth it.
No. It makes a lot of sense. And I'll be honest, I think this season I've been spending up too much on defense, where I'll see these matchups where, like just this week, San Francisco versus Washington, you're tempted to spend up on San Francisco. But Kelly, you're absolutely right. If you find the right defense that finds that pick six that week, I mean, look at the Raiders. I don't think the Raiders have moved up in price for many, many weeks, and they've just been an inspired defense with Alec Pierce as head coach. And so it's something where finding the guy at the bottom who's just going to have that one good week is the much better play than betting on the more safe option at the top.
Right.
So,
I don't like looking at, I actually don't even necessarily pay attention to the matchup when I'm looking at defense as I do when I'm looking at other positions. We look at how many points does this team give up to tight ends or to receivers or to rushing. But when I look at my quarterback and when I look at my defense, I don't necessarily look at that too much, especially not on my defense.
Oh, I think it's fair. All right, guys, we're moving on to Prop Quiz, brought to you by BetStamp. BetStamp funnels all of your betting and DFS needs into one place to help you get the best bang for your bets. You can use the link in the description of this video, and they will show you what DFS sites are available in the state that you play in. Plus, they'll help you secure any offers that are offered by those websites. They'll also help you out with prop bets, as will my two co-hosts. Austin, let's talk about it. 3 of 5 last week, moving up 54% again.
Yeah, it's been going pretty well over the season. I'm liking how we have trended throughout 16 weeks so far, and we're looking for more in week 17. I have 5 picks, and I have checked the lines across Underdog Fantasy, Thrive Fantasy, and Boom. And there's some interesting differences between the sites where I think you could get some value if you get in quickly, because I imagine these lines will condense.
They'll all catch up, exactly.
So if you're watching this on Friday, rush to the app. Run, just go open them up now.
Yeah.
First, we have David Montgomery over 55.5 rushing yards on Underdog and Boom. It's up to 56.5 on Thrive versus the Dallas defense. They've struggled against the run, particularly runs up the middle, and that's where David Montgomery really thrives. Next, we have Kyler Murray, mentioned this earlier, over 27.5 rushing yards on Thrive. I was shocked to see this because he's basically done this in every game. 28.5 on Underdog and Boom. DeAndre Swift, over 65.5 rushing yards. This is one of the bigger discrepancies. He's 65.5 rushing yards on Thrive, 68.5 on Underdog and Boom versus Arizona, who not great on the ground, defending the run. So I love this. Also, DeAndre Swift has done this a couple of in 2 of his past 3 games, and against tougher matchups.
I say better opponents.
Cardinals. Yeah. So I like that there. Then we have Chris Olave. I doubt this is the same when you wake up in the morning. When we wake up in the morning, he's currently his line's at 66.5 receiving yards on Boom. So I would definitely be taking the over there. It's 70.5 on Underdog and Thrive versus Tampa Bay. Still taking the over. Kelly mentioned Derrick Carr earlier, probably popping off against Tampa Bay, and it's going to run through Chris Olave. Tampa Bay, not only have they struggled against the pass game, but they've given up a bunch of big games to number 1 receivers. So I love Chris Olave's spot this week. And then my favorite pick, this is just exclusive to Thrive for anybody who only plays on Thrive for whatever reason. Sam Laporta, over 18.5 yards for his longest reception versus Dallas. Here's my thing about this. Sam Laporta, he is always kind of a potential for a big boom play. Also, Dallas's defense is very aggressive, which means it leaves them susceptible to being gashed downfield. Detroit Lions have one of the highest explosive play rates in the league, so I love this spot for Sam Laporta. He's done this in over half of his games this season.
Yeah, not only do they have super aggressive corners, but they blitz their linebackers a lot. So that's something that could free Laporta up on a seam route, and 20 yards shouldn't be that tough at all. Kelly, all your picks are coming from Underdog.
Yes, they are. And they all came from this run through in this show.
All right.
So we have Rashee Rice, higher than 6 receptions. He's been on a streak of 6 or more. Jaylen Warren, I'm going lower than 65.5 scrimmage yards because his streak has been 50 or more. So 67.5 feels like a stretch.
Interesting.
Gerald Everett, higher than 4.5 receptions. He's been on a streak of 5 or more. Derek Carr. We're going higher than 240.5 passing yards. He's facing this weak defense, and he's on a streak of the 3 or more passing touchdowns.
I think that's a lock.
Derrick Henry for a touchdown.
Just
He's
scoring a
had
touchdown.
4 in his last 5 games.
I'm surprised they don't take that one off when he's playing Houston because it just makes 0 sense. So, Kelly, as I pointed out earlier in the show, it's time for the Valedictorian Shootout where you guys are going to announce lineups. And Kelly, you murdered this man last week, 154 to 114, 40 points. And I have missed, I believe, 3 episodes of this show, certainly 2, and you have won every time I have not been here. So I am jinxing you, but I think you're going to be able to keep your streak alive. Austin's 111, Kelly's 1-5. There are at least 2 matchups of this show left. So Kelly can get this a little bit closer to respectable. But certainly after that beatdown last week, Kelly, do you want to announce first or second? I saw for the first time ever, Kelly already has her lineup in the show sheet. She wasn't playing around this time.
I wasn't. I was focused today and on it. So I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Let's do it. I'm playing Derek Carr. I'm playing Austin Eckler, who I wrote about in my player profiler.
I was going to say that's the first time we've heard his name today. So,
Derrick Henry, we talked about tonight. Puka Nacua, that's just, you've got to.
Makes good sense.
Rashee Rice. Adam Thielen's been on a bit of a tear, and he fit in nicely salary-wise. Gerald Everett. Doubling up on tight ends. I'm going with Chig Okonkwo. Did I do it right?
You did. You did perfect.
Very inexpensive this week. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I want to say it was in the low 3,000s. And the Denver Broncos as my defense.
Yeah, no big surprises there. Maybe Austin Eckler. So I noticed you picked Gerald Everett, but you also have that Denver defense. So you were going 2 Chargers against the Denver defense. So you just think this is going to be a wild game, I'm guessing.
I feel like it's going to be a wild game, and people are going to live up to their projections and their ability. Austin has some very serious history against the Broncos. Another streak, 6th game in a row versus Denver with 70 or more scrimmage yards. And he's had a touchdown in 6 of his last 7 meetups with the Broncos.
There you go. You love to see it. I thought you were going to give us a stat on Austin Amandolia and not or Austin Eckler. I was like, whoa, Kelly has all the stats for us this week. But Austin, go ahead and give us that lineup. How are you going to reclaim your throne against Kelly?
Yeah, I was very confused about that reference to Austin.
Yeah. But she was like, Austin. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Austin is 0 for 1 on a streak. He's a 1 losing streak.
I love it.
That's true. It was a rough week for me. So my lineup this week, first off, we have Kyler Murray as my quarterback at 6,300. 2 running back build this week. First off, big shot, Christian McCaffrey at 9,600. Chuba Hubbard at 5,800.
I am seeing a lot of Chuba Hubbard love this week.
Yeah, he's a good money saving option. Obviously, if Josh Jacobs is out, I will be putting Zamir White in this lineup instead to be able to do some other tinkering around. But for now, at receiver, we have Rashee Rice, 6,900. I like him as a cash play this week. Noah Brown at 5,100, especially with CJ Stroud returning. And then Rondale Moore at 3,600, as mentioned earlier. And then in my flex, I have Wan'Dale Robinson at 4K. Have not talked a lot about him, but he's been getting a decent amount of targets, and the matchup is pretty good. Tight end, Trey McBride, 5,900. And then at defense, we were able to squeeze in the Carolina Panthers at 2,700.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Quick question, just as a preview, will Wan'Dale be in the article tomorrow? Because that's a name we hadn't heard today.
That is definitely going to be in the article tomorrow.
I love it. Folks, for the last time, you can play with us. Not for the last time. We'll probably be running these contests throughout the rest of the season. But for the last time on this show, you can play with us. You'll find links in the description of this video to play with us on DraftKings and FanDuel. And we always announce the winners at the end of the show. Last week, father-to-be Chris Molina won the DraftKings League with 195 points. I feel like that's a pretty high score for us there. That is his 3rd win of the season. And P for Shizzle took down the FanDuel League with 150 points, his 2nd win of the season. So if you guys would like to hear your name at the end of the show, join the contest, beat us. It's quite just that simple. Kelly, tell people what you're working on, where they can find it.
Oh, shoot. I'm just working. You can follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Kelly in Phoenix.
And she posts everything she works on there. You'll be able to find her Arizona Cardinals coverage, her work she's doing on DFS. But way more importantly, you also do DFS golf, Kelly. So if you have people out here who you've put a ton of money in their FanDuel and DraftKings wallets this season, you're going to give them another way to make some money later on, right?
We are, and I actually solidified a date. We're kicking off with the Sony Open January 11th. Me and my cohort, Mr. Adam Hallis, will be back to join me, and we will be serving up some golf because I was 78%, I think, last season. So let's do it.
Word. So she'll help you win some money, plain and simple. I remember Josh made a big announcement that he cashed in like his first ever golf tournament where he listened to the show and took you guys' advice. So I'm not guaranteeing you're going to cash, but you have a 78% chance. Austin, what do you got coming out?
Yeah, you can catch me every Friday here. And then every Friday, my DFS Cash article comes out, the A-list, where I give you 14 players every week.
Yep. You can follow Kelly at Kelly in Phoenix. You can follow Austin at Austin_FFL. And we'd appreciate if you follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL. The website is clubfantasyffl.com. And as I've begged you for 17 weeks now, just go ahead and hit subscribe on that YouTube button. Folks, DFS coverage is going to continue this specific show for at least one more week. We are going to cover you guys for the week 18 when nobody has anything to do but play DFS. So that should be our most popular show of the season, and we're gonna bring the heat. There may be some shows in the offseason. There will still be articles in the offseason. We are going to have you coverage, and as I mentioned, once football is over, we're sliding right into golf. So Club Fantasy doesn't give up on DFS, and neither should you. If you are in the championship this week, I am not. Good luck this week, unless you're playing Austin or Kelly. I can't wish you good luck. I want my co-host to win. Everybody else, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Good luck. I hope your teams do great. Have a wonderful day.